Hi, welcome to the webinar for preparing a DACA initial request. My name is Jane Lee. I'm an attorney with Centro Legal de la Raza. We are going to be covering what is DACA, what are the eligibility requirements, and how to fill out the DACA forms, and how to send the DACA request. Centro Legal is a legal services organization located in Oakland, California in the Fruitvale District. We provide legal representation in immigrants' rights, tenants' rights, and workers' rights. We also have a program that mentors youth who are interested in law. Centro Legal is presenting this webinar to provide information about DACA, who is eligible, and how you can apply. We're not recommending any specific course of action or giving you legal advice that is specific to your case. If you need additional assistance, we do have a referral list that is provided in the Google Drive materials. Centro Legal is not agreeing to represent you in your immigration case. So what is DACA? Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is the acronym DACA, was created by executive action on June 15, 2012 by the Obama administration. Individuals without immigration status who came to the United States as children and meet several guidelines may request consideration of deferred action for a period of 2 years. You have to renew the DACA request every 2 years with USCIS, or the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Deferred action is a use of prosecutorial discretion to defer removal action against an individual. This means that the US government knows that you're in the US without legal immigration status, but they are choosing not to detain you or try to remove you from the country because you meet certain requirements. Deferred action does not provide legal status. So what are the benefits of applying for DACA? DACA recipients are eligible for work authorization and can be issued a social security number. And in many states like California, you are eligible to get a driver's license. So a work authorization card looks like this here on the screen. It would have your name, your information, your date of birth, and it gives you a validity date at the bottom from and when the card expires. So the work authorization goes along with your DACA status or DACA eligibility and would have to be renewed 150 days to 120 days before it expires. DACA recipients can also request advanced parole, which is permission to travel and re-enter the United States after being abroad. For some individuals, this can open up other immigration options. The risk of applying is that the government does have your information. And if you're arrested for a felony or a significant misdemeanor that would violate the terms of having DACA, you can be placed into removal proceedings. A little bit about the more recent history of DACA. After it was created in 2012, and when the Trump administration came, in September of 2017, it was announced that DACA applications were no longer being accepted. There were lawsuits that challenged this announcement. And in June of 2020, the US Supreme Court decided that DHS's termination of DACA did not comply with federal law, that it was arbitrary and capricious. Then in July 28, 2020, a memo came out responding to the Supreme Court decision called the Wolf Memo, and it announced that renewals will only be good for 1 year instead of 2. There will be no new initial applications being accepted, and advanced parole will only be for exceptional circumstances. So there were individuals that between the time of the Supreme Court decision in June and the Wolf Memo in July that did apply for a DACA initial, and those were rejected. Then on November 14, 2020, the US District Judge in Eastern District of New York said that the Wolf Memo is invalid. So in compliance with the order of the District Court, USCIS is now accepting DACA initial first-time applications, and that was starting in December 7th, 2020. So for those who applied during the summer and got it rejected, they should all be getting notices to apply for DACA as it's being accepted now. So is DACA here to stay? We're not sure. It's still in flux. DHS can seek relief, and the incoming administration has expressed strong support for the continuation of this program and those who would benefit from DACA. For now, what we know is that USCIS is accepting first-time DACA initial applications as well as advanced parole. Who is eligible for DACA? There are these requirements. First, that you are under the age of 31 as of June 15, 2012. That means individuals who were born before June 15, 1981, came to the United States before their 16th birthday, continuously resided in the United States since June 15, 2007 until now, was physically present in the United States on June 15, 2012, and that is the date of the announcement of the creation of DACA, was undocumented as of that date, June 15, 2012. So if you entered unlawfully, you would not have been documented, or if you had legal status entering, that status has expired or now terminated as of June 15, 2012. You have to have, there's an education requirement where you have to show that you're either currently in school, you've graduated, or you've obtained a certificate of completion from high school or a general education development certificate, or that you were honorably discharged from the Coast Guard or Armed Forces of the United States. Additionally, they want to know that you have not been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, 3 or more other misdemeanors, and don't otherwise pose a threat to national security or public safety. So for the first requirement of age eligibility, you do have to be under the age of 31 on June 15, 2012. And you have to be at least 15 years old to apply. Unless you're in removal proceedings or have a prior removal order, then there is no age limit. So what do you show to prove that eligibility? You can show your passport biographic page, the page with your photo and your date of birth on it. You can submit your birth certificate with English translation that's accompanied also by a photo identification. You can provide a national identification card or state issued photo ID with your date of birth on it. The next requirement is that you were in the US before the age of 16. So if you came before the age of 16 and never left the United States, there's no further evidence needed than to show that you were in the US before 16. So something like a school enrollment record, immunization record that shows something you were in the United States under the age of 16. If you came to the US, left, and then came back after the age of 16, there's still a possibility you can show that you're eligible if you can show that you resided in the US before the age of 16. So since that needs additional evidence or evidence that you were there before, you may want to speak with an immigration attorney to check that you would meet those requirements. The types of evidence you would show to that you were here before the age of 16 would be passport, school records, employment records, medical records. If you came with a visa, there's an I-94 card that you may have been issued. So DACA eligibility, the third one being continuously resided in the US since June 15th, 2007 until now, and that you are physically present on the June 15th, 2012 date. So to show continuous residence since June 15th, 2007, you want to provide documentation that accounts for almost every monthly evidence. So it could be bank statements, pay stubs, school attendance record, and you want to avoid any gaps of more than 3 months. That might show that you weren't continuously residing in the US. So if you have more than a 3-month gap, it could be seen as you having left the United States, took up residence in another country, and then you would not meet that continuous residence requirement. We do have a chart that's provided in the materials in the Google Drive that looks like this. You have all the years from 2007 all the way up to 2001 and the months. So as you're getting evidence, if you have bank statements for 2007, then you want to check off the months that you have it and make sure none of these results in bigger gaps than 3 months. So it might be a combination of school attendance record, bank statements, pay stubs, medical records, dental records, monthly subscriptions. A note about transcripts is you would want to get the attendance record from a school to show that you were physically in a classroom on a particular day, rather than a transcript where it's possible to have continued your studies without residing somewhere in a particular location. Some of the documents that you have may work to show more than one requirement. So it might go to show continuous residence as well as to show that you were in the US before you were 16. A note about the kinds of evidence that you may want to gather. Again, school attendance records opposed to transcripts. Although transcripts can work to show that you were in the US before 16. Employment records, pay stubs are good. A lot of times the pay stubs have a number of hours that you worked, but pay stubs have regular checks that come in. So it can show that you were in the US working. Medical records, dental records, wellness checkups, anytime that you've seen a doctor. And the record should have your name, some identifying information about you, like your date of birth or address. And you want to show where that document came from. So it can't be, immunization record shouldn't be just the dates and checking off of the vaccinations. You want to know where the clinic was or who the doctor was, just so that it's an official record. Utility bills, also rent agreements, rent payments that were made, religious records, money order receipts. If you regularly sent money to somebody and it shows your name, the date, where it was sent, gym memberships. Sometimes you have to kind of get creative here because you might not necessarily have regular records. If you're using bank statements, make sure there's activity in that account. So if you're doing like savings account statements and it only shows that you have a certain amount of money in a bank without any activity in that particular month, that's not going to show that you are actually physically in the United States. You want bank records to show on a particular day you had filled up your gas you purchased gas at a gas station that is located in Oakland, California. So it identifies the date and that you're linked to this bank account. This is your account, and you use that account to get gas on a particular day. And that's how specific you need to get with the evidence. If you're missing gaps of time, or the evidence doesn't look sufficient enough, then they may request additional evidence. So USCIS might send you what's called an RFE, or request for evidence, further evidence, to ask to fill that gap in. The other thing to note about these is if you're using employment records and you used a false social security number that's not yours, you don't want to be submitting those records. Additionally, like medical records, you want to check the medical records to see that there isn't anything else in there that does not look good. Like if you were in the hospital for overdose of drugs that are illegal drugs, that's not something you would want to submit because that implicates other things. Copies are sufficient. You don't need to provide original documents. And any documents that are not in English need to be translated. It has to be translated into English by anyone who's fluent in both English and in the other language. It doesn't need to be a certified interpreter. It could be anyone, it could be a family member that's translating your birth certificate, as long as the translation has translated on top, the information translated into English, and a certification by the translator saying I'm fluent in English and the Spanish language, and I certify that I translated the document to the best of my abilities, and they sign it with their contact information on there. So for continuous residence, it's kind of broken up into two periods. There's June 2007 until June 2012, and there's after August 2012, and how USCIS views any gaps in time period. So before June 2012, you can have brief, casual, and innocent trips abroad. And that could be absences that are accomplished to just provide the purpose of the absence. So if you were in school during that time and in the summertime you went abroad, but not more than 3 months, let's say you took a 1 month abroad somewhere to stay with your grandparents, that can still be okay if that's before June 2012. But after August 15th, 2012, you cannot have any absences and leaving the United States that would make you ineligible for DACA. So present in the US on this specific date, June 15th, 2012, you must show that when DACA was announced on that day, you were physically in the United States. If you don't have that specific date, you can provide evidence of something a little bit before that date and then something a little bit after that date. But you want the evidence to show that overwhelmingly that you would have been present on that day. It does kind of coincide with the graduation dates or end of the school year dates. So maybe a graduation certificate or something that you may have received an award at that time. But this does have to be solid evidence and not just by affidavits of people saying you were here on a particular day. So types of evidence, again, we have school records. You can show bank statements showing an exact activity date. So on June 15th, you went to the grocery store and purchased money, then you can highlight that on that bank statement to show evidence of physical presence. Again, pay stubs. There might be photographs of you and your siblings or friends' graduation that was posted on social media. And then you can pull that up. It would have like a date on there on when it was posted. Evidence should have identifying information about you and where the document came from. Another requirement is that you were undocumented as of June 15th, 2012. So if you've had no status coming into the country, then you don't have to specifically show evidence that you continue to have no status. But if your last entry was with a visa, you need to show that it was expired or terminated. So there are passport stamps, and you might show that. This here is an I-94 card that you may receive when you enter the United States. These days, if you do cross by plane, they are online and you don't get these little cards. But you could see for this one, this is an example. There's a stamp here. A B2 visa is a visitor's visa, and it shows that the entry and the red is September 21st, 2011, and usually they do expire in 6 months. So the expiration is March 20th, 2012. And the number here on top would be the I-94 number. And you can see here it says Department of Homeland Security, CBP I-94 departure record. So this is something that you may use to show, yes, you came in with some kind of status and a visa, but it has since expired, and it's expired before June 15, 2012. So on June 15, 2012, you did not have any status. And another requirement, the next requirement is the education requirement. If you're currently in school, you can show your enrollment record or your transcript or attendance record or like assignment that you've done. If you've graduated from high school or earned a GED certificate, you can provide a copy of that. Or if you were honorably discharged as a veteran of the Coast Guard or Armed Forces, you can provide evidence of your identification. So education requirement includes K-12 education, college, adult school, ESL, and vocational schools as well. However, if you are a student with ESL, literacy, vocational, or career training programs, you might need some additional evidence to show that it is a qualifying program. But I think in the past, some people didn't realize that other types of education were included and may not have applied, but those do count. And then you have to show that you were not convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors, or pose a threat to national security or public safety. If you do have any arrest history, please consult with an immigration attorney on how to proceed. We would not advise you to proceed on your own in these situations. Felonies and significant misdemeanors are bars to DACA eligibility, and you should not apply. Your application will be rejected, and USCIS will have your information, and they could use that to put you into removal proceedings. Any types of records that involve guns, gangs, drugs, those are all big red flags for USCIS. Marijuana, while legal for a certain amount in California, is still federally illegal substance. So you have to be careful about that. Some gang types of convictions that might be in your sentence, you might have probation conditions to stay out of gangs, or there are certain things called gang lists or databases that you might be on. It's just very risky to apply, so please consult with an immigration attorney. There are certain offenses that don't lead to automatic disqualification. So if something happened when you were juvenile, that would not be considered to be a crime that bars DACA eligibility. But again, if it involves gangs or drugs or guns, there's still a consideration for assessing it under public safety. Expunged records. So a common thing is driving under the influence is considered a significant misdemeanor, and it would bar you from DACA eligibility. But if you've finished all the terms of your probation, usually 3 years of probation, you may have had to go into a program and pay a fine. After all that's done, you would be eligible to expunge the record. So if you do expunge it, then you can show proof of that expungement and be able to apply for DACA, and they would consider it. Minor traffic offenses also would not bar you from applying for DACA. So a misdemeanor is a conviction with potential jail sentence of 6 days to 1 year. And this slide shows that significant misdemeanors like burglary, domestic violence, drug trafficking, DUI that involves alcohol or drugs, sexual abuse or exploitation, unlawful possession or use of a firearm, or any other misdemeanor for which the jail sentence is more than 90 days, then that would be significant. You should not apply. And there are some exceptions to that. Non-significant is any misdemeanor convictions with up to 90-day sentence, infractions or violations that don't carry any jail time. Wet reckless in California, those have been successful. So they're not necessarily DUIs, but sometimes if you get charged with a DUI, you might be able to get convicted of a wet reckless. That sometimes in California you might be able to apply for DACA, but again, some states with similar statutes have not been successful. So all of this to say, you should really consult with an immigration attorney. Even if you are eligible to apply with certain kinds of arrest history or conviction history, they do look at the totality of the circumstances. So any criminal history can result in a denial if they think you're a threat to public safety or national security, unless you can show exceptional circumstances. So if you assess that you are eligible for DACA application, you can prepare an application packet. So now we're going to go into how you prepare your application. Cover letter, there's a template cover letter that you can use that's in the Google Drive folder. And then you need some USCIS forms, the 821D, which is the DACA form. And along with that, you file a separate form for employment authorization on Form I-765, and a one-page worksheet that shows why you need employment authorization. A G1145E notification is optional if you want to get like text or email notification about the status of your application, when it's accepted, when it's approved. You also need to provide two passport size photos, and those are 2x2 photos that you can get at the post office, at Walgreens, CVS, Costco. And you also need a $495 filing fee. And that has to be by check or money order. They do not accept cash. And it's made payable to US Department of Homeland Security. It has to be written that way, not USCIS or DHS. It's US Department of Homeland Security. So all the forms and instructions can be found on USCIS website, as well as additional information about DACA. They also have a frequently asked questions section that's also very helpful to look at. USCIS.gov, and you can search for the forms and you can download them. Sometimes the forms that you download won't allow you to fill certain fields in a certain way, where they might ask you for a date and you need to approximate it, but by default, they're going to put the first of the month. So instead of giving incorrect information in that way, you might want to print it out and fill it out by hand. If you do that, you want to use black ink, not blue ink or purple others. Use black ink for signatures, black ink to fill out a form. Don't use corrective tape or cross it out using whiteout or highlighter. It kind of messes up with their scanning system. So just print out a new page and fill it out again. Print single-sided. They do not like double-sided forms. So what we're going to do now is look at the actual forms. And we do have this like annotated form as well as the blank forms in the Google Drive. So this is what the consideration of deferred action for childhood arrivals, or Form I-821D, looks like. The form numbers are at the top, and they do have expiration dates. So you just want to make sure you're using the most current form, because they do reject if it doesn't have the most, you're not using the most current version. So if you've tried to use it in the past and have an old form, just make sure it's the most recent. So the first part on the left column starts with, I am requesting an initial request. That's what you would check. This is the same form that they use for renewal requests. So if later on you do get approved and you're applying for your renewal, you want to check off renewal request and the expiration date. But for those initial applicants, initial request. Write your full legal name. If you have two last names, put both of them in there. Your first name, your middle name. It should be the way it is on an official document, like your birth certificate. If you've gotten married and changed your name with your marriage, then how it is on your marriage certificate. If you've used other names, there's a place on this form where you can put other names that you've used. So then you would enter your mailing address. And make sure that this is a safe address, because notices and documents, your work authorization card, social security card, if you want it, will be mailed to this address. So find a safe mailing address. The mailing address could be different from your actual physical residence. So your mailing address, then the next column asks if you've ever been in removal proceedings. And if you have, you can check off yes. If you haven't, you can check off no. Having been in removal proceedings does not affect your ability to apply for DACA. The next page, if you have an A number, that's your USCIS file number, or that's how they look up your records. So if you've ever applied for anything before, you may have an A number. If you don't have one, put NA, and basically by the time you're approved, you will have an A number, and this application you submit will be part of your record. If you have a social security number, you can put that in there. It should be a valid number. You can put your date of birth, your gender, your city of birth, country of birth, Current residence should be the United States because you have to show that you're in the US now. That's one of the requirements. Country of citizenship or nationality is usually your country of birth. Your marital status. This is about legal marriages and official legal divorces. So you check off married if you were legally married. For divorce, if you're just separated and not legally divorced, you're still married. Other names used, if you've used other names that are different from your legal name, be consistent with the work authorization, work permit application on other names used. But if you're using, if like your school records only has your first last name and not your full double last name, you'll want to put that in there. If any of the evidence that you're submitting shows a misspelling of your name or a different version or variation of your name, you should put that in. If you have more than one, it tells you to go to Part 8 additional information, which is on the last page, on page 7. This is where you'll continue information that doesn't fit on the main form. Then you write the page number, what part it is, what item number, and you'll say, you know, other names used, and then list all the other names that you've used. Then they want some processing information or some kind of biometrics information, your ethnicity, race. If the other ones don't apply, kind of by default, it is white. You can also leave that blank. Your height, weight, your eye color, hair color. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. You know, weight fluctuates. So as long as it's in the ballpark, it's good. Part 2 asks about travel information. And it says, I have been continuously residing in the US since at least June 15, 2007 up to the present time. And so you want to check off yes, that you've been here because that's one of the requirements. If you answer no, you should speak with a trusted legal service provider to see how you should proceed. Page 3, part 2, asks about residence. They want to know everywhere you've lived. So up here, list your current address and to the best of your knowledge, the addresses where you resided since the date of your initial entry into the United States to the present. So since your initial entry to the United States until now, they want to know all those addresses. You work backwards chronologically, so your present address is first. And this is where the forms that you download from USCIS might not cooperate because you might not know the exact day, but you know the month, year, or you might know the year and not the month. You want to, if you can't do it on the form, you want to just print it out and handwrite it, or leave that blank and print it out and then fill it in by hand. And you don't want like gaps. You want to make sure when you started this address, you ended your prior address, before. You don't want there to be a gap in the addresses. And you're working backwards. If you need more space, again, go to that last page on page 7. Say, I'm continuing information from page 3, part 2, and then number 5 or number 5, and then you can put address 4 and put that address and the dates you were there. Address 6, address 7, going all the way back to when you first came to the United States. If you go beyond the additional sheet on page 7, you can just get a blank piece of paper, put your name, date of birth, and that is a continuing addendum to your I-821D application, and then attach it to the end of the form. Travel information. So this is list all your absences from the US since June 15, 2007. So if you've left the US, you can put that information there. Number 8 says, have you left the US without advance parole on or after August 15th, 2012? So this has to be no. If you left the US after August 2012, then that is that makes you ineligible. Remember, we were talking about 2 different time periods. So up until the summer of 2012, you could have had a brief, casual, innocent absences, but not after August 2012. If you have your passport information, you can put that here. What country issued your passport, what's your passport number, expiration date of the passport, and a border crossing card if you have it. That's for people in Canada and Mexico that lived in states that are on the border, and they might have a kind of card that allows you to go in and out. It's a type of a visitor's visa. Part 3 is for initial requests. Again, this is for initial as well as renewal. So when you do renew, you don't need to fill out this part. For initial requests, you do have to fill this part out. And the first question asks, I initially arrived and established residence in the US prior to 16 years of age. So that's a requirement. You want to check off yes. Date of initial entry into the US, on or about. So here in the sample, we put approximately with a little tilde, January 2005. So if you know the year, month, you don't necessarily need to know the exact date, but if you're not sure of certain things, just put approximate. Place of initial entry into the United States, you want to identify the US side. So if you crossed over in Tijuana, the US side would be San Ysidro, California. Immigration status on June 15th, 2012. If you came without status and never had status, but no lawful status. If you enter the US with status, then you want to, might say status expired, or if you had a parole document, parole was expired. Were you ever issued an arrival departure record, form I-94? That's the little white card I showed you in the presentation. And if you didn't come with any status, then you wouldn't have it. If you do, you would check off yes and put the number on there, the 11-digit number. And if that stay expired, the date that card expired. The education requirement is here. You would indicate how you met that requirement. So you're currently in school or you're graduated from school, and the name, city, and state of the school that you're currently attending or where your education was received. So here we put like Oakland High School in Oakland, California. Date of graduation or when you last attended. So we might say June 2010 as a graduation date, or you can put like January 2021 as the last date that you've attended. And military service information, if that applies to you. Then part 4 is security questions about criminal, national security, and public safety information. If any of the questions are a yes, you will want to consult with an immigration attorney just to make sure that things are okay for you to file. Some of these are absolutely you cannot file. So the questions are, have you ever been arrested, charged, or convicted of a felony or misdemeanor, including incidents in juvenile court in the United States? Do not include minor traffic violations unless they involved alcohol or drugs. So you may be checking off yes, and it's a misdemeanor that will still allow you to apply. But even still, you want to just check with an immigration attorney on what other evidence you need to provide to balance that arrest. So if you've had a DUI that has now been expunged, you would put that information, but because they're still assessing your public safety and it's kind of discretionary, you want to put in additional information like support letters, things that show you've been going to AA consistently, or evidence that shows that that's something that's not going to happen again and you're a different person and it would not happen again. So because you need additional evidence on top of that, you'll want to consult with an attorney. Other ones are like, have you killed anyone, tortured anyone, been a member of a gang, engaged in terrorist activities, severely injured anyone, had sexual contact or relations with anyone who was forced or threatened, recruited, enlisted people in armed forces that were under the age of 15. So you have to be careful on those. Then the rest of it is kind of certifications and signatures. So you either check off that you can read and understand English, or you check off 1B saying that you use an interpreter. If you use an interpreter, you check that the 1B box and the language that the interpreter helped you with. Then as the requester, you sign and date, sign in black ink, and you put your phone and contact information, email address if you have it. If you use an interpreter, you put the interpreter information. If for any blank spaces, put NA, not applicable. So an interpreter could be anyone fluent in English and your best language. The interpreter does not have to be a certified interpreter and can be a family member. If you use an interpreter to help you fill out the form, you need to add their information on this form. And the interpreter says, I'm fluent in English and the language, and then the interpreter also signs and dates. If you had somebody prepare your application, you would have somebody sign as a preparer. And this is the additional information. So that's the DACA form. Now we'll move on to the other form that's required, which is the I-765 application for employment authorization. You'll want to put this application in because this is what gives you the big benefit of DACA is to have the work authorization. And the work authorization is what carries the fee, the $495 fee. The fee is $410 for the application plus the $85 biometrics fee, and you can put that in one fee. The biometrics is an appointment that you have afterwards where they give you an appointment at a service center to get your fingerprints taken and your signature as well as a photo. And that's when they'll run your fingerprints to see if you've had any record. And that's how they would know if you've been arrested for anything or have any charges. The DACA form actually does not carry a filing fee. So reason for applying, this form is used for DACA as well as all of the types of applications where you're authorized to have an employment authorization. So some of the information you're skipping, some of the information are specific to you. Here it says 1A, initial permission to accept employment. If you ever lose your card or it's damaged, you can check off 1B to say you want a replacement, and that carries the same $495 filing fee you'll have to pay. I'm sorry, it would be a $410 for a replacement. 1C is renewal. So if you get DACA approved and you want to renew your application, you're paying a $495 fee and checking off renewal. Similarly, your full legal name, make sure it's consistent with your DACA application and it's your full legal name. Other names used, make sure you're consistent with your DACA application on listing all the variations of your names, misspellings of your names, aliases that you've used. Part 2 has your mailing address. So if you're using a different mailing address than where you reside because it's a safe place to receive your mail, then you would check off that your physical address is not the same as your mailing address. If it's the same, then you check off yes. But basically, you have your mailing address as well as your physical address. Again, A number would be the USCIS file number. If you have it, it's a 9-digit number, otherwise put NA. USCIS online account number, that's only if you've ever registered for an account. Gender, marital status, again, this is legal status. Have you previously filed a form I-765? If you have, under maybe a different types of applications like asylum or a TPS, different things, then you would check off yes, but otherwise it's no. And again, DACA has to be that you don't currently have status or as of 2012. So if you do have other statuses, you cannot be applying for DACA. Social Security, have they ever given you a card? If not, then you can request one. If you have, they want you to provide that Social Security number, and that has to be a valid one that was issued specifically to you. So if you haven't had one, do you want one issued to you? And if you do, you check off yes, and then you would check off yes for 15 that you consent to USCIS sending your approval information to Social Security so that they can create a Social Security number for you. And if they do that, after you get your approval, of a couple weeks later, you'll also get your Social Security card in the mail. And that Social Security card will be restricted to use only with a valid work authorization, but that number is your number for life. So if you later on, you get legal status some other way and you want to lift that restriction from your card, you can go back to Social Security office and ask them to issue you a card without that restriction on it. So your father's name and your mother's name, and then your country of citizenship or nationality. So if you're a dual citizen, there's space to put 2 countries. Your place of birth, city, state, country of birth, and your date of birth. And then information about your last arrival in the US. So when you last arrived, if you had an I-94, put that I-94 number. If not, just put not applicable. If you used a passport to enter last time, then you can put that information, otherwise not applicable if you didn't use a passport to come in. Then you want your approximate date of last arrival, as well as the place of last arrival in the US. The status would be of your last arrival, it would be no status, or if you came as a visitor, you would put the visitor information, and your current status would be no status. Number 26 is only for student and exchange visitors, so that would be not applicable. On 27, you want to put in the eligibility category, and for all DACA is C33. So you put C33 in the box. Then numbers 28 to 30 is for other categories, so you don't need to answer those questions. You could put not applicable for the blank spaces. Actually, all the way to 31B. Then you would write whether you can read or understand English. If you're using an interpreter, check 1B instead and write the language. Your phone number, email address. And you would sign and date. If you don't sign these forms, they do reject them. So make sure you sign in black. If you use an interpreter, use their full, put their information, their name, their mailing address, contact information, and they need to sign on this page. And if somebody did help you prepare the form, then they would fill that out. If you're sending it on your own, there would be no preparer, you put not applicable. And here on page 7 of the work authorization form, if you do need additional space, you can use this back space here and to write the page number, part number, item number, and you can say continued other names used and like list other names used. Then the last form is the worksheet. So if you're asking for a work permit under deferred status, they do ask that you provide this worksheet to show why you need work authorization. It's a 1-page form. There's no signature on it. It's kind of an estimate. So put your name, your current annual income, your current annual expenses, and the value of your assets. So again, it's approximations. You don't need to provide additional evidence to show your income and expenses and assets. So this is just kind of in good faith. Assets might include also savings account information. If you own a home, how much is in principal that you have. And if you have a car, that's anything that's readily converted into cash. Explanation for why you need it. It could be a brief explanation. An example here says, the reason why I am requesting a work permit is to be able to provide for myself and to be able to continue my education in the United States. So something brief and simple works. So going back on how to compile this. Filing tips on it is don't send originals, print single-sided, use black ink, And don't use highlighter or correction fluid or tape. Remember to sign the forms, include the correct filing fee for $495, and keep a copy. Track your package. You want to keep a copy because when you do renewals, you want to refer back to your initial application to make sure the information you're providing is consistent. And you want to track your package, so you may want to send it by USPS, or you may want to send it by FedEx, and the mailing addresses are different. So we do have a sample cover letter and materials in the Google Drive to kind of help you put it together. So what happens after you file? You'll get receipt notices. So if your application is accepted, you'll get a receipt notice for the DACA application and another one for the work authorization application. And the receipt number is on the upper right-hand corner, and that's how you can track your application. You can actually go onto uscis.gov, put in the receipt number, and it'll tell you the status that they have. If you have any trouble with it, there's a number at the bottom of that receipt notice, so you can call, and the first thing they're going to ask for is your receipt number. If the application is incomplete or the filing fee is incorrect or other errors, the entire application package will be rejected and returned to you. And at this stage, if they're returning it, they haven't even accepted the filing, they return the filing fee. Then what happens is about within 3 months, you're going to get a notice for biometrics at an application service center. So they're going to give you a date, time, and a specific location. There is one in Oakland for your appointment. You bring the notice along with the government issued photo ID, and there's like a form on there to fill out. And USCIS will take your photo, fingerprints, run your background check. If you don't receive this notice within 3 months or so, you should call that number on your receipt notice to let them know so they can issue you a biometrics notice. If you don't go to your biometrics appointment, they do consider that an abandonment of your application. Then after some time, we're not sure what the processing time is for these initial applications, because then they have to review the application. If it gets approved, you'll get approval notice on I-8 for the I-821D as well as the I-765 work authorization. Soon after you get these approval notices, you'll get an employment authorization card mailed to you. That will be good for 2 years. And again, you need to renew your application about 150 days to 120 days before it expires, because sometimes they're very quick to review these applications. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. So in order to avoid any gaps in your employment authorization, you do want to apply for it ahead of time. If you lose your card, you can file to replace it, but you will need to file the filing fee again, provide the filing fee again. Then also after your approval, you'll get a social security card if you ask for it. If there is a possibility, if they need more information, you'll get what's called an RFE or request for evidence. If USCIS wants additional information because there's gaps in your residency or there are certain requirements that weren't met, maybe your birth certificate is illegible or a translation wasn't provided, you're going to get a notice to correct that. And they're going to give you a certain time frame to do it. So if they're only giving you 60 days, you need to respond within that amount of time where they receive it by that date. So you got to take into consideration the mail time. Late responses or no responses will result in your application being denied and you lose your filing fee. If during the time that this is all pending, you change your address, it's your affirmative duty to fill out a change of address form. And you can do that by paper, or you can also do it by going online to uscis.gov. You'll need your receipt number and you'll be able to have a change of address. If your application is denied, speak with an immigration lawyer to help review your application to see why it was denied. You'll want to keep copies of the original application as well as any correspondence that was received by USCIS, receipt notices, biometrics appointment notices, requests for additional evidence, the decision letter on why it was denied, so that somebody can review it with you. It might be that you are not eligible to apply to begin with, or it might be that you needed to correct something and you can apply again. You don't have a right to appeal the decisions, but again, you might be able to apply again. So if you need help with filling out your application, you can contact some organizations on our referral list for assistance. The Google Drive DACA initial self-help folder has that list as well as other information, and that's the link to it there. Thank you and good luck.